Shailene Woodley is arguably one of the most notable actors of the 2010s and has been a face in the industry for quite some time, making a remarkable jump from TV to blockbusters to casual it girl to critically acclaimed indie darling, all in a span of few years. She's kind of done it all. She's someone I grew up always seeing in the media in some way or another, especially in my teen years, and left a weird mark in my taste in cinema that I now look back on and wonder what kind of magic dust were authors sprinkling in these YA novels to make them so profound at the time. But since this is a new video segment I like to call the Teen Reign, I decided to take a look back on the actors I once couldn't escape on my Tumblr feed and rediscover the projects or controversies that made them a dime a dozen. And Shailene's rise is especially fascinating to me because she wasn't exactly pigeonholed into a particular category or typecast. She just kind of did stuff and accidentally stepped into this new sense of superstardom and never quite wanted much to do with it. And the response to that throughout the years has been very interesting to see, but more on that later. So, without further ado, let's take a deep dive and discuss the discography of Shailene Woodley. In the midst of the ever-growing 2000s conversation of teenage pregnancy, Juno, the little indie that could, and the rise of teen mom content on MTV, like most people, I first discovered Shailene through the ABC family drama, The Secret Life of the American Teenager. Created by Brenda Hampton, a former creator of Seventh Heaven, this story follows a 15-year-old band geek named Amy Juergens, who hooks up with a boy named Ricky at band camp over the summer, and later finds out that she's pregnant after the start of her sophomore year. Throughout the show's run, there's a lot of drama involving her high school peers and straying from their archetypes, such as the bad boy, the nice guy, the cheerleader, the promiscuous girl, and so on. The show's premiere garnered over 2 million viewers and grew on a weekly basis, becoming one of the top scripted dramas on the network and of the summer. But that didn't go without scrutiny from the critics, mainly scoffing at the show's quality. I wasn't an avid watcher of this show, but from what I remember, this show doesn't exactly hold up well. Though it tried to be something somewhat innovative for young adult content, it had a way of coming off very clunky to me. I mean, it's a fair question to ask, how long can you stretch an entire TV series about a pregnancy without filler plot lines or nonsensical character arcs? But if the show were to accept that challenge, it would fail very quickly. The dialogue was scattered and a single conversation somehow felt like an eternity. The performances of some of the actors were straight up diabolical. In a way, I could say that the show carried the illusion of feeling very adult-like because of the taboo topic showcasing on primetime television. It was something you could watch with the family, but you most likely wouldn't want to. But all in all, was there much intrigue to it? Not really. In a perfect world, a show like this would still be in rotation, with newer and older generations still dissecting the storylines, and it'd be well deserved for taking such a bold concept and making it something different. But again, shock value can only take you so far. And seeing as this was a very sensitive time for these topics, and the audience reception was sort of dicey amongst parents, the network took it upon themselves to also air a PSA after every episode. The show ended up airing for 5 seasons and ran for over 100 episodes, ending in 2013, but in 2020, Shailene finally gave her honest thoughts on her experiences on the show, stating, quote, "When I signed on to Secret Life, I read 3 episodes and I signed a contract for 6 years. Those episodes all hit home. I had friends in high school who were pregnant. It felt like everything that I wanted to be sending into the world. But as the show progressed, so did its gospel of abstinence. Characters wore promise rings, vowed to save themselves until marriage, and shamed those who engaged in intercourse. Amy's pregnancy became more of a cautionary tale than a progressive plotline. There were a lot of things that were written into the scripts that not just me, but a lot of the cast disagreed with. There were belief systems that were pushed that were different than my own. Yet legally, I was stuck there. To this day, it's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. So being on Secret Life propelled me to be more vocal about my own belief systems." End quote. The finale consisted of Amy's character finally getting her happily ever after as she snags a new job in New York City and chooses herself after being involved in a love triangle for several seasons. Though it was rumored that she was supposed to end up with the father in the final scene, it's been alleged that Shailene did not wish to come back for it, seeing as the show was finally cancelled and she most likely had no more contractual obligations to stick around for it, and so she was finally able to move on to newer projects and spun into the direction of movies instead of TV, which quickly pushed her into the spotlight. One of the first low-budget knockouts of the 2010s was The Spectacular Now, and not because of the box office. This coming-of-age romance centers around the very introverted star student, Amy Finnicky, played by Woodley, falling in love with the popular party boy, Sutter Keeley, played by Miles Teller, during their senior year of high school. After their informal meeting on her front lawn, they quickly become close and embrace each other's differences, as she encourages him to put his guard down and open himself to the idea of love, and he helps her use her voice and stand up for the things she wants in life and for her future. I watched this film quite a bit growing up, and there's no other way to describe it besides emphasizing how natural it is. The dialogue was super realistic and freeing, especially since the actors were given the room to improvise on a lot of their scenes. The summary presence even played a huge part in this story, sort of highlighting the fleeting feelings of the last class hurrah and dancing with the issues of parental figures and the overconsumption of alcohol. Shailene's character in particular is well-rounded and has plans for her future, though she has a problem with putting everyone else's feelings in place of her own. She cares a tremendous amount for her mother and fears leaving her behind, if and when she decides to go to college. She also grows so attached to Sutter that she fears leaving him as well, and only wants the best for him, even though he sees no value in his life long term. As the summer closes, they're faced with the reality of whether or not the relationship can actually continue, or if it was a fling that burned too bright. In the end, we see a bit of a time jump on Sutter's life as he finally decides to change his self-destructive ways and finds the courage to go visit Amy, leaving the future of their relationship open-ended and up to the viewers. The movie was met with a lot of critical acclaim and was absolutely beloved on the internet. It only secured her name for indie projects in the future, as she was also one to watch since her 2011 film The Descendants with George Clooney. But little did we know what she booked next was about to turn the YA genre on its head. If you want to talk about pop culture impact, this is the one. If you want to talk about the power of internet buzz, this is the thing to study. If you want to talk about soundtracks, casting, and building up proper hype for a movie that took the world by storm, this is it. Because it was more than just a gem, it was the whole diamond. The works of John Green were inescapable in the early 2010s and spoke directly to the millennial and Gen Z population, so much so that he was kind of being branded as a modern John Hughes, because his active works dominated in the coming-of-age category. Shailene scored the role as the infamous Hazel Grace Lancaster, who was a book-smart teen diagnosed with thyroid cancer at 13, and meets the ever-so-charming Augustus Waters at a cancer support group, and changes the course of her life and her thoughts on love forever. Beating out over 200 actors for the part, John Green announced Shailene's casting by stating, quote, "I am absolutely thrilled that Shailene will be playing Hazel in The Fault in Our Stars. It means a lot to me that she is a fan of the book, and I know from our conversations that she has a profound understanding of Hazel. Watching her audition, I felt like Hazel Grace Lancaster was talking to me. It was eerie and very exciting," end quote. I read this book in 2013 and remember being really excited to see how this would turn out from page to film. But fortunately, we didn't have to wait too long. Unlike most movies, fans of the book were able to get behind-the-scenes access footage of the cast, talking about their characters, answering fan questions, and generally getting to know the people behind these roles a little bit better through the vlogs of John Green himself. This only brought more hype to the movie as the premiere approached, and quickly became a worldwide hit, garnering over $300 million on a $12 million budget. The fan-made art was huge. The promotional smash hit that was Boom Clap by Charlie XCX jumped to #1 on Billboard's pop charts, and it became one of the most quoted books on the internet. But Shailene's favorite? I fell in love with him the way you fall asleep, slowly and then all at once. Coming in strong during the peak YA dystopian film era we were met with another formulaic blockbuster that captivated young readers. Based on the novel by Veronica Roth, Shailene starred as the 16-year-old Beatrice Pryor living in a futuristic Midwestern world, where everyone has a predestined group and plays their part in society. She soon discovers that she doesn't completely fit into the categories provided and is a secret new thing, the unspoken and often hunted divergent. Arguably the last of its kind before the great dystopian film fatigue and being neck and neck with The Maze Runner, the first film actually did pretty well in the box office. The next one out-earned the first, and the last one was around a $100 million drop, making it the lowest earned and a certified flop in the box office. In its heyday, the push for this movie was enormous, and the public had interest in wanting to get to know Shailene more as a person. But in pop culture fashion, it wasn't exactly for the right reasons. From what I remember of Shailene at this time, at least from her interviews, she was very down to earth, very earthy, very natural, honest, and just had a very low-key personality. Almost like she would clock into work and do the interviews, take some selfies, follow the rules of her contracts, and just go home and be a normal person. But for some reason, I think Hollywood really didn't like that. They dared to even write some of the most backhanded pieces about her, in my opinion. So while doing some research, I actually checked out an article from Time magazine titled, "Why Hollywood Desperately Needs Shailene Woodley." And in this article, it starts out with highlighting her press run for Divergent and nudges at her being the feminist role model we've been waiting for in Hollywood. And just like that, I was taken back to 2014 again and feared for my life. But what ended up happening was one of the most interesting bait and switches I'd ever had the displeasure of reading. Like, it already started off bad, but it got even more bad in like a much worse way. To shorten things up, this article was a pitch to sell Shailene as the next Jennifer Lawrence. And I'm not even kidding. Apparently, it was rumored that Jennifer was going to take a year-long hiatus, which she later clarified to be untrue. It would only be a couple of months. But since these girls were both shining really bright at the same time, and a break in Hollywood wasn't exactly encouraged, there may have been a sudden media push toward Shailene, seeing as she was newer on the scene. Comparing their humble beginnings on TV and their leaps to indie, to YA dystopian blockbusters, to similar hairstyles and personalities, these two were just starlit twins separated at birth. But was this a sell point most people bought into? No, it was not. The article goes on to highlight some statements involving Shailene's take on being single, the movie Twilight, and feminism. And I'm sorry, but the most earth-shattering one to me was definitely on Twilight.
You just don't get it.
But since these movies starred a girl fighting for power, it makes sense as to why they went in the feminist direction as far as questioning goes. But sometime in 2014, Shailene actually caught a lot of backlash for her statements regarding feminism. One statement in particular. In another article from Time, who was always at the scene of the crime for some reason, Shailene is asked if she considers herself to be a feminist, to which she responds by saying, quote, "No, because I love men, and I think the idea of raise women to power, take the men away from the power, is never going to work out because you need balance. With myself, I'm very in touch with my masculine side, and I'm 50% feminine and 50% masculine, same as I think a lot of us are. And I think that is important to note. And also, I think that if men went down and women rose to power, that wouldn't work either. We have to have a fine balance," end quote. Now, I can't say that I was too surprised by this take. I mean, this was from 2014, and the word feminist was sadly used more as a trend than an actual focus on a serious movement. And quite a few female celebrities at the time really basked in dipping their toes in that sector for the sake of a provocative headline. So I will say that while this take was indeed bad, it was at least different. In a response to Shailene's statement, writer Anne Friedman wrote an article for The Cut titled, "I was Shailene Woodley, I used to say I wasn't a feminist." And in it, she talked about her own experiences with feminism. But what really stuck out to me was when she wrote, "The 'Are you a feminist?' test is most often administered to young female celebrities who have dared to challenge stereotypes or allude to their beliefs in gender equality. Interviewers never ask this question of male celebrities, and they rarely ask it of older women. And in the context of mainstream media, Are You a Feminist is not movement building, it's a trap. If young women say yes, tabloids and conservative pundits are quick to decry their perceived radicalism. And if they say no, they've got the feminist police to deal with. Usually they take a middle ground. They decline the label but say a bunch of other smart things that make clear they're quite aware of gender inequality and the need to remedy it." End quote. And funny enough, I think my thoughts as well as hers can both be true at the same time. These situations still happen quite a bit with up-and-coming women in the industry, even though this article was from nearly a decade ago, and I don't see it ever really stopping. If you stay in a certain lane, people will ask where you stand on it, but the best part is, time can allow a change of perspective. Shailene has since been asked about her thoughts on feminism then versus now in a 2018 interview. When asked if her quote was taken out of context, she replied, "That quote was so long ago. It was also in a different time of feminism. You know, feminism has had so many forms over its many, many decades of being around. To me, I say today that I resonate as a feminist, but take that word out of it. A word is a word. A movement is a movement. Practice and action are what actually makes a difference. So I can call myself a feminist all day long, or I can say that I'm not a feminist all day long. But if my daily interaction with the world is taking steps to uplift, empower not only women, but also men in their relationships with women, and women and their relationships with men, and women to women, and improving sisterhood with women, and changing our judicial system to reflect that which society is asking for, that, to me, is where my greatest interest lies. But for the sake of the movement, and also for my beliefs, I think at this point it is important to use that word as a tool just for means of other people understanding who you are." End quote. Kicking off her first leading role in a series since The Secret Life, Shailene jumps into another role of motherhood in this critically acclaimed project. Working with the likes of Reese Witherspoon, Nicole Kidman, Laura Dern, Zoe Kravitz, and the direction from notable late director Jean-Marc Vallée, Shailene plays a young mom by the name of Jane Chapman. She's new to town and isn't exactly viewed as traditional as the other women. She's unmarried, mysterious, and wants a fresh start. So she picks a quiet town in the coast of California, where everyone knows each other's secrets, but no one knows her hushed past. She's portrayed as somewhat of a rebel in the show, seeing as she doesn't stick to the unspoken rules of the town, but wants more than anything to keep a low profile. However, she has no choice but to defend her and her son's reputation throughout the show. When asked what she hopes people can take away from the series, she states, quote, "Not everyone can relate to living in Monterey, California, a super white, super privileged area, but everyone can relate to being a mother, or having been mothered, or being in a relationship. Whether those relationships are between their children, or their lovers, infidelity, monogamy, all of these are issues we relate to." End quote. The first season went on to be nominated and win several awards, with Shailene also scoring a Primetime Emmy nomination. And as of posting this video, there have been various talks of a season 3 in the works. Now, I'm not completely sure what the average viewer's stance on that could be, considering the second season wasn't as well received as the first, but only time will tell. I did not watch it. But either way, I like to think that Jane's character arc is something to root for, and everyone adores most of the cast regardless, so they may have a better chance at finding their footing this time around. Going back to her indie roots, Endings Beginnings follows Shailene portraying the 30-year-old Daphne, who has recently quit her job, broken up with her boyfriend of 4 years, and moves in with her half-sister. And with that destruction of a description alone, I knew it was a film that was made for me to watch, and so I did. And in Shailene fashion, she gives a very raw, emotional performance of a young woman who is in the middle of starting over and seeks out more from her day-to-day life, while making a few mistakes in the process. Before making this film, her and her cast were given an 80-page outline of the script and were encouraged to improvise, which is why it made me feel somewhat reminiscent of her role in The Spectacular Now, and the honesty she brought to that role apparently made her think about her own circumstances behind closed doors, stating, quote, "What improvising an entire movie does This forces you to be truthful in a way that even in your own life you're not truthful. Because of that raw, vulnerable state we submitted to while performing these characters, I learned a lot about what was and wasn't working in my personal life." End quote. There are elements to this movie that may sprout discussions involving relationships, family, and the possible downsides to hookup culture, but it really depends on how you view Daphne's actions throughout the movie. I encourage anyone to see it. I'm pretty sure it's free on YouTube at the moment. I was originally iffy about adding this film to the list because Shailene didn't exactly have too much of a presence in it, but I guess I'd like to tie this movie in with my thoughts on the direction I think her career is starting to take. The Fallout follows a high schooler named Veda whose life changes forever after a school shooting occurs. Played by Jenna Ortega, this film focuses on the once lively nature of Veda and her reborn relationships with her classmates, who were once strangers, her old friends, who feel like strangers, and her family, who don't quite understand how to navigate the Veda they now see. Shailene plays the role of the therapist that Veda sees, and only shows up twice in the movie. Her appearance wasn't exactly gripping by any means, but is portrayed as rather clunky and awkward, seeing as it's their first meeting, and Veda isn't exactly sure what to say. While looking for more information on the movie, I came across an interview from the director, Megan Park, who just so happened to be one of Shailene's co-stars from The Secret Life, and was her directorial debut. When asked about Shailene's involvement, Megan says, quote, "We've always remained very close and she has been such a supporter of me as an artist. She read the script just as a friend and she was like, oh my god, can I come play the therapist? I want to be a part of it and work with you as a director." She also mentions her and Shailene sharing the same therapist and have for a long time, which made the character easier to write for. All in all, I think it was an interesting character for Shailene to try, seeing as she's rarely taken the backseat in most of her projects, and didn't often play people that were seen as advisors or consultants to others. And given the project she has in the future, I think that may be something she'll continue to do. Being someone who's watched Shailene grow a name in the industry for over a decade has been really interesting to see. And although I've never considered myself to be a fan of hers or followed her career closely, I see that she continues to do this job, not because she has to, but because she enjoys it. And from the looks of her upcoming projects and change in management, she seems to have no intentions of slowing down anytime soon. She's done it all and more. But no matter what, we'll always remember the teen reign of Shailene Woodley.